Some of the big fear for so many Nigerians asking the big question now that they have the bailout. What's next? How well can you extricate yourself out of this? Do you get enmeshed in another problem and you look for another bailout? Are we likely to live in a world of bailouts? Joining us to look at this is the President, African Emerging Markets Network, Mr. Femi Afolabi. Good to have you join us this morning.
Thank you for having me.
Well, we had a potpourri of comments from respondents there in that particular report, and even a farmer is saying that, look, there's so many things that can be done, especially if we look towards the agricultural sector. What does this bailout mean to you when we say we have been able to bail some of these states out? Do you think that we are home and dry?
Thank you very much for the question. It gives a lot of concern when we realize that the bailout was meant to take care of arrears. Now, quite a number of the states, it was shocking to know that about 18 out of 36 states were financially distressed and couldn't pay salaries. By the time the bailout was being put together, 22 states were beneficiaries. And up until yesterday, indeed beyond today, it's not likely that in some of the states, the bailout wouldn't have reached people whose salaries were still being owed by government. It's more disturbing when you realize that we're just 1 quarter into the tenure of this administration. They're meant to be about 16 quarters. So if in quarter 1 there's this kind of agitation and trouble regarding financial situation, it gives you an idea how dire the next 15 quarters will be. But more importantly, like I said earlier, it's worrisome if the bailout was meant to take care of arrears. Now, beyond this payment of arrears, which is being struggled with in many states, what happens going forward? Now, there's so many options that are open to us. The government means well. The international community is particularly motivated by what's going on in Nigeria, and the hopes are high, both locally and outside our country. But we need to get our acts right. There has to be proper agenda setting. No entity succeeds or achieves a lot depending on why it exists if it doesn't set agenda for itself. Corporate organizations will set goals at the beginning of the year. It derives from their vision. They do that every year, go for retreats, and they'll have timelines against each of those goals, and it'll be measurable. Quarterly, they review their performances. Now, as a country, we need to come up with some agenda setting. Even the United Nations had Millennium Development Goals. It gets to a point, and then they review the goals again. Right now, we have Sustainable Development Goals being presented to the world. And over time, it'll be measured, it'll be evaluated, it'll be reviewed, and it gives the next direction going forward. So as a country, there has to be a policy direction for us. For the states, they have this bailout, but beyond this bailout, which will not even take them beyond this first quarter, some of them are even saying it's not enough. What happens? If we do not do something right now, we'll have a crisis on our hands. Even when the government means well, both at the federal level and the state levels, it's important for us as stakeholders, all of us, who may not even be in government at this time, to begin to look ahead of this time, analyze the situation, and bring out all of the pitfalls that stand ahead of us and see how we can avoid it.
To look ahead, some will say you need to look back a little bit.
Correct.
So let's see. How is it that some of the states got to the point where they had to go for a bailout?
Excellent. You see, it's been said over and over again. Even the World Bank has commented about that. People who love Nigeria have commented about that. And internally, smart people, people who are experts, have said that over and over again. That it's wrong to have a nation with a monoproduct economy. Now, when you have your entire economy and projections predicated on one product, which is crude oil, it's dangerous. There's no fallback plan, there's no alternative. Then suddenly, world affairs and other happenings around the world, and the way the world is right now, what happens in the next man's country would affect you, except you shield yourself and take position ahead of time. Now, we saw all of what was happening, and America kept putting shale oil in the market. We see how oil prices began to dwindle and started falling beyond the benchmark we have. We have a benchmark at $65 per barrel. It fell from 115. With that situation happening, the federal allocation that goes to the states began to reduce. A particular state that was getting about $4.5 billion naira every month started complaining that they were now getting 1.5 billion naira monthly. Now, that's a sharp drop. Most of these monies go to wage bills.
Okay, let me leave the allocation and
Yes.
look at, are the states restricted from seeking investment outside? I mean, foreign direct investment to their states. Is that besides the issue of taxation, internally generated revenue? Some will tell you there's not much you can get from internally generated revenue. But are the states restricted in any way from getting investors into the state so that they can generate revenue from it?
Absolutely not. There are sectors of the economy where power constitutionally have been devolved to the states. One of them is the area of education. And I'll come back to what African emerging markets needs to do, because we don't just want to raise alarm and paint very gloomy picture without an alternative way out. There are areas like you've asked where the states are empowered to impact the economy. For example, in education. Even in education, the UBE, which is the primary education, is operated at the level of the local government. Now the states are allowed to do that, even though in some cases, some sectors have power shared between the federal and the state government, like in education. There's federal government colleges. In some other climes, you do not hear of federal universities, for example, in the United States. Most of the universities are largely state universities. So in Nigeria, the states are not restricted. And that's why, as part of the progress going forward, we'll suggest areas where we're focusing on. Like I did say earlier, there has to be agenda setting. Looking at the situation, there has to be a clear policy direction by this government. Up until this morning, we're only hearing things from the outside. It's been said that it's safe for us to hear things from the inside as well. And there has to be engagement with the people that you're providing leadership for. So government means well, but we need to understand the way government is reasoning for us to follow government effectively and achieve the goals of government. But right now, there's no policy direction.
Education, you talked about, there are those who argue that how much of revenue can be generated from education enough to power a state?
Right. Maybe I need to state clearly the concerns that we have looking at the situation of the states and how financially challenged they are. At least 29 governors are new who have not served in the capacities where they now occupy. In the states, it looks like there's a bandwagon effect because the federal government doesn't have a cabinet yet. Many of the states do not have cabinets, commissioners at the state levels. Now, things are happening, it's over 100 days, and it doesn't look like we're making progress, no policy direction. We can't read the government.
Do you think that this has to do with ministers, I mean, being appointed? You don't think that, perhaps even the president, through pronouncement, could give some direction as to where exactly he's looking?
Yeah, he can give direction, but ordinarily, the vision has to derive from the leader, but there will be people who need to drive this vision at the various tiers of government. So he needs to understand globally, or at the macro level, what he intends to achieve with the policies in various sectors, and then the ministers need to drive it. He can't drive it in every ministry. He's too few an individual to make that happen. And so the ministers need to do that job. And in the same token, at the state levels, the commissioners are the ones that need to drive this process when the state governments understand their vision and a clear direction of what they hope to do.
Because when we begin to hear, sorry, Suleiman, when we begin to hear statements like civil servants do all the work, ministers are just noisemakers, perhaps we begin to understand just where the president could be going with his non-appointment of ministers just yet.
Yeah, it's worrisome. We interface with the private sector, and we know that things have significantly slowed down because there's a lot of anticipation, wondering who will be where. Because the percentages that occupy certain sectors give you an idea of what may happen in those sectors. For example, we don't know the finance minister. There's concerns, not only locally, but even internationally. They can't read the policy direction of government. The CBN alone can't do that. Of course, it's strong enough, but they need to see who it is that will drive that process. The monetary policy is different, the fiscal policy is different. They work together. So it's important. See what happened in the agricultural sector with a Dr. Adesina at the helm of affairs. It won us accolades not just locally, but even internationally. We see the impact and we see how much progress we have made.